You're listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast with veteran missionaries Eric Johnson and Joshua Mead. We're glad you could join us. We trust this podcast will be both a blessing and a challenge as we relate topics in world evangelism from a missionary perspective. Now, here's Josh and Eric. Hi, this is Josh Mead, and you are listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. I am here with Pastor Ryan Hayden, and I'm excited about this particular interview. Pastor Hayden he wears many hats. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a pastor, as well as founder of an online company. He does a lot with media ministry, things like that. I'm going to let him explain it. Right, Pastor Ryan, why don't you give us, well, first of all, tell us, what do you prefer? Pastor Ryan, Pastor Hayden? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your story, who you are, your background, and then let us know about some of the work you do, and we'll get right into this interview.
Yeah. My preferred honorific is the honorable great.
Yes.
Personally, I just like it when people call me Ryan, unless I'm their pastor. So there's 100 people in Central Illinois that call me pastor, and everybody else can call me by my name. I'm a pastor here in Mattoon, Illinois, which is right in the middle of the state, near Effingham, Champaign, that area. I've been here as a pastor for 10 years. I went to college, went to Crown, graduated in 2005. And when I was in college, I didn't even have my own laptop, believe it or not, but I was super into Photoshop, and I got into web design really early, before web design really was the thing. And so when I graduated, I went with my wife. We would go to Barnes and Noble constantly, and I would just read all the books. And I found the first podcast about web development, and I listened to it every week. This would be 2006. And so slowly over time, I taught myself this skill of not just designing websites in Photoshop, but developing them and writing code. And then I learned programming, and, fast forward 10 years, I tried to create a church website platform. That was a dumb idea, by the way. And I raised some money on Kickstarter. I thought I raised a ton of money. It was $6,000 or something like that. And I ended up turning that $6,000 into -20 very, very quickly. And so I had to do something to pay that debt off. And so I started freelancing, because that was the only skill I had at any marketable value. And the freelancing thing turned into owning an agency. And I now own an agency. I've got about 20 employees. I've got a couple business partners, so I don't own it outright, but we did 14 apps for different businesses last year. So our agency runs like a well-oiled machine. And so now I'm in this weird spot where I'm both a pastor and I own a company.
Yeah, so. No, that's awesome. I always tell young people in college, especially if they're going into ministry, specifically the mission field, is who I address mission students. And I try to tell them, when you go to the mission field, number one, know you're called of God, but develop a skill. Develop a skill in something you enjoy, whether it's media, whether it's, online software development, whatever it is. Learn to develop another skill, because there's so many different facets of ministry that different secular skills could be put to great use. And I've been following you for a while. I know you mentioned right at the beginning here, and this is awful, when you're a missionary and you're traveling, you meet so many people. You actually mentioned that we met before 12 years ago at one of our supporting churches. And of course, missionaries feel awful when they don't remember those first encounters. Of course, we connected later online, and I've been following some of your ministries. I've been following a lot of what you do and produce. And I've been intrigued for a long time with media development, and we're trying to do that here. My brother-in-law is a pastor in Canada, and he does a lot of the same website design and development. He does a lot of
Mhm.
that for us. And so it's so important that maybe speak to that before we get into really the reason why we're having this interview, to discuss a new app that you're coming out with that will be a great blessing to missionaries. But can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe share with some of our listeners, whether the young men or women going into ministry, speak to, the importance of learning to develop a skill, how you can develop a skill like that. How would somebody go about it? You mentioned teaching yourself. How important is that?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I've got weird views on everything, man. And so
No problem.
you might want to like steer me so I
No,
don't get you
no,
in trouble.
no.
I honestly think that everybody that goes into the ministry, I think the default should be that they have some marketable skill, some trade. And I got lucky. I taught myself. I had an interest. It was just a weird interest that was a hobby, and I got lucky, and the Lord blessed. And that's probably the better way to say it. But I never intended to make any money doing web design, web development. It was just something that it was my hobby. It was a freakish thing that I was into. It was nerd. Um, it is so easy now to teach yourself programming if you have a brain for that.
Right.
When I say easy, it's going to take you years, okay? But there's no barrier to entry. And if you want to do that, just go to there's freecodecamp.com. There's a company called Treehouse where you can pay, I think it's like $25 a month, and it's guided lessons, and you choose a track, and you can go from start to fairly well off foundation of being a developer in that program. It wasn't like that when I
Sure,
started,
sure.
12 years ago, 13 years ago. It was actually, no, more like 20 years ago now. It was I had to find books, and I didn't know which books were good and which books were bad. And there was one podcast for web developers when I first got started, and I just happened to find it. And so it's easy to teach yourself anything with the internet. But it doesn't have to be something technical.
Sure.
Teach yourself to be a plumber, or to do electrician work or whatever, and have something that you can fall back on. I think it will benefit the cause of Christ in a great way if people did that, and
Oh,
helps people respect you a little bit more too, I think.
oh yeah, I
So,
absolutely 100% agree. I don't know where I'd be as a missionary without YouTube helping me figure out plumbing and electric and mechanics and all of that, because those things don't come naturally. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that there's so much benefit to somebody going into ministry or somebody who's already in ministry, to continually to develop different skills, find something you're interested in that you can put to use, and like you said, it's not necessarily primarily to make money, but it does allow you to engage your community more effectively on a real day-to-day basis. And so I'm excited about this app that you've developed. I've been seeing posts online through a couple of groups that we're in, and you've been sharing a little bit about it. I'm excited to learn more about it today. I've been reading a little bit about it. I went to your website, missionhost.com, and it shares quite a bit about it. I encourage our listeners to go over there and check it out. But you are developing, basically, to summarize it, it's an app that would basically be like a Airbnb for missionaries traveling on deputation or furlough, an easy way for them to find places to stay. Talk about this app. Tell us what brought about the need for this in your
yeah, I'd
mind.
love
And
to. I'd love to. First off, not my idea. Okay. A missionary friend of mine, a super sharp young missionary, Benjamin George, third generation missionary in Argentina, came to my church, and we just hung out for a while. Drunk yerba mate on my porch, and bonded a little bit and talked about what I was doing. And he calls me about a month ago, and he's like, I've got this idea for an app. And he's like, we need to make an Airbnb for missionaries. And my first thought was like, why? That's stupid. Why would anybody want to do that? And he explained, he said, look, I know where I'm going to stay the night of my meeting. I pretty much know where I'm going to be Saturday night and Sunday night and a lot of Wednesdays, right? But there's 4 or 5 other days in the week where I have to find a place to stay
Yeah.
as I'm traveling around the country. And he said, I spend hours, I've just got a piece of paper that's passed around that has all these different prophets chambers on it. And I spend hours calling these poor pastors on this list. And a lot of them, the numbers aren't even right, or they send emails and the emails get ignored. And he said, it's a pain. And then we spend money constantly on hotels. And he's like, there has to be a better way. And my was like, why hasn't anyone done this before? This is the greatest idea ever, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I make apps for a living. Like, that's my primary source of income. Our business does not do apps that cost less than $50,000. And this is a fairly complicated application. If my business did this for somebody, it would probably cost $65,000-$75,000 to make it happen. And financially, there's just no, it's a small enough group. Missionaries are a small enough group that there's no financial incentive to do this, right? You're never going to recoup your investment if you did it. So I prayed about it, and I was like, if we cut every corner, if I do as much of the work myself for free, if I find a developer that I trust that can work with me and just manage the project and have him, pay for it at cost and give him some time. It's like, I think we could do this in like a tenth of that. I think we could do this in like $6,000. And so that's what we're doing. We're in the process of developing this and trying to raise money. And we're pretty far along. I'd say we're probably about 65-70% done.
Okay.
There's a lot to do yet. But we've got the app running, and people can set up accounts. So I'm not turning that on yet for everybody, but we've got just a lot of work done, and we're working on it, just chipping away at it every week. I'd say we're probably a month away from launching this thing. So
that's very exciting. So walk us through kind of what it would work. And first of all, before we talk about some of, how it would work, basically, I just want to say, if you're listening to this, I'm going to do this after I get off. I'm going to go and give a donation and help with this app. I know it would be a great blessing to missionaries. And at the end of this interview, he's going to give you, Ryan here is going to give us information how we can connect with them. And I want to encourage you, pray about giving toward this, whether you support missionaries, whether you're a missionary yourself. It's going to be a great blessing. And this is kind of a no-brainer. It's something that you think, why wasn't this done before? And this is something I had thought about a long time ago. Talked with my brother-in-law about what it would look like to develop a website. This was before I knew anything about apps, or it was just mostly websites. And he's like, man, this would be such a big project of coordinating and putting things together. It's not going to be super easy. And so we kind of just left that be. But so I was excited to hear that somebody's developing this. And I mean, for what you're saying, but $6,000, that's nothing to get something like this developed. It's clear that you are not taking money. You're not wanting to do this for any profit. This is purely a ministry. And so
no, there's no money being changed hands. All of that money is going to pay somebody. All of my time is volunteered time. A lot of people have volunteered time on this. But in order for something, you're probably talking 500 hours, hours of work.
Easy. Yeah.
For this to happen. And 500 man hours, not just 500 man hours, but 500 man hours of very specific high, people that could take that 500 hours and make $50,000 with that 500 hours, know? So it's a sacrifice for the developers to work on this at the price that they're doing at. We just have to pay them so they can pay their bills.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. But
definitely.
Nobody's getting rich off this project. That's
no. Yeah. And so for our listeners, this is definitely something that would be a worthy donation to give toward. Well, let's talk about a little bit, how this app will work. We're going to look at it at two angles. We'll look at it from the missionary perspective, and then let's look at
Okay.
it from a pastor's point of view. Let's start with the missionary point of view. Um, so I download the app. Let's say it's up and running. Everything is functioning. I download the app. I set up an account. What
Mm-hmm.
information do you need from me? And then how do I find a place? Let's say I'm going to be, I just preached at your church, just presented our ministry, and then I've got to drive, to Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin. I got a church on Sunday. It's Wednesday night. I've got a couple days left. How do I find a place to stay between your church and the church in northern Wisconsin I got to be at in 2 days?
Okay, so it's going to be pretty simple. First off, primarily it's going to be a website. When I say
Okay.
app, I'm talking about a web app most of the
Right,
time.
right.
We
Sure.
probably will eventually get a iOS and Android app done, but
Okay.
we're trying to just get this thing launched first, and so
Right,
it's going
right.
to be a web app to start. But you would log in, and you would when you log in, you'll see a list of all of the locations that are available to stay in. You'll see photos, and you'll be able to filter by a location. So you could say, like, if you're in Illinois and you want to travel up to northern Wisconsin, you could put a city in the middle, and then you could have a radius, say 50 miles, 100 miles from, like Lacine, Wisconsin, or something like that. And that would give you your radius, and it would filter all of the locations down to there. And then you could further filter, and this is obviously wishful thinking because we're hoping lots of people sign up for this, and this is a catalyst for people doing this. But you could also filter by places that have a spare room for your kids, or
Okay.
places that have Wi-Fi, or places that have laundry, or places that have a kitchen that you can use. Or if you have an RV, you can find places that have RV hookups. So yeah, and then you can click on the individual location that you choose.
Okay.
And also you put in the date, so it's only going to show the dates that these
I
are
see.
not booked for somebody else,
Right,
right?
right.
Um, you look at the location, and you can see multiple pictures of each room, and very important, you can see the requirements for staying in that location.
Okay.
So if it's only available to people that are of a certain mission board, or of certain doctrinal positions, that'll be right there. If they expect you to sweep up and wash the sheets when you leave or whatever, it'll be right there. And then you'll just click a button and says, request to stay. And very important, there's no phone number there for the pastor or the host.
Okay. Yeah.
So what it's going to do is it's going to say, have you read the requirements? And you're going to
Mhm.
say yes. And then it's going to send a request with your profile information, basically your packet that you would send to churches, and the dates that you want to stay. It's going to send that request via a text message to the host. We're not assuming that this is all churches. It could be individuals that have an apartment or something. It's going to send a text message to them. They'll be able to click on that text message. There'll be a link. They can see you. They can read all about you, read about the dates, and then they can simply say yes or no. And when they say yes or no, you'll get a text message that says, hey, you've been approved for staying at this location at these days. And then you'll get reminder text messages, a day before the stay, if it's a month out or something like that. And so will them. That's it.
Excellent. Well, it sounds just like the Airbnb. Basically, our past furlough we took, we basically stayed in Airbnbs because they're cheaper than hotels. But sometimes, a little harder to find, and there's always hidden fees and things like that. And I always, as a missionary, you would, like your friend said, who suggested and brought up this idea of an app like this, you do get a list of prophet chambers from your mission agency sometimes, or you discuss with other missionaries and you kind of build up this repertoire. But there's always those challenges of, any missionary will tell you, reaching out to pastors or secretaries and trying to coordinate, especially if there's a time crunch and you need to stay somewhere and it was a last minute thing. Could be a little more difficult, and you don't want to waste your money, if you don't have to, on a hotel. In fact, when my wife and I were on deputation and we had a long stretch in between meetings, we would find a campsite somewhere and just camp out because we didn't want to spend that much money. Number one, we didn't have any money to spend as it was, in between meetings.
Mhm.
And so something like this would be much more beneficial. How would, you know, uh, I guess there's no way of knowing until it actually starts, going into real world use. But if I am to send, let's say I look at my schedule and I think, oh man, I forgot to find a place this Friday. It's a week out. I forgot to find a
Uh-huh.
place for this Friday where to stay. Have you done any testing, or do you have kind of or will you not know until there's like actual real world use of this, how long it will take for a church to respond? Because I think a missionary would be concerned with, sometimes it takes us a week or two even to get in touch with a pastor. Will
Well,
this allow to expedite kind of the process of, if I need something next week, I could probably find it
my
more easily?
my hope is that it expedites the process.
Yeah,
And if you want to pivot to the pastor's concern or the
sure.
host's concern,
Yeah.
I think that's the key. Okay. So, like my church, we have a prophet's chamber. And we would love for missionaries to stay there. And if you're traveling through the middle of the country, I'm like I said, I'm central Illinois. The confluence of 57 and 70 is about 20 minutes away from my house. So you probably have driven by here multiple times and just never thought about it. And we have a prophet's chamber with bunk beds for the kids and a kitchen and it's fairly
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, I would love for people to stay there. I am not going to put my phone number on anybody's list. I'm a pastor and I have a business, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like my church members can get in touch with me. I don't want to talk to missionaries looking to stay in my prophet's chamber 2-3 times a day for the rest of my life. We don't have, our church isn't
Yep.
big enough to have a full-time secretary, so I don't want to put that on somebody else, you know. So I get it. And then pastors are concerned that, maybe some missionaries are going to stay there that they don't approve of, or maybe the missionaries are going to trash their place, or you know, there's all kinds of concerns that pastors have. Um, and so how are we I think the bigger challenge is answering those problems, right? So the first thing we decided is that there would be no phone numbers shared with missionaries and vice versa,
Okay.
right? So like you can share your phone number personally if you want to, but all of the communication for this is going to happen through the application. So the application is going to send a text message. You click on a link and open it. And so second, we're going to cut down on the back and forth, like, oh, can you send me your doctrinal statement? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, can you send us pictures? Oh, do you have this? Do you
Right.
have that? There's so many of these conversations that probably happen over and over and
Yep.
over again
Yep.
that could be solved with a page that just says, here's the photos of the place that I have for you to stay. Here's the things that are available. Here's the schedule of when it's available. And then the host has the simple option of just pressing yes or no. There doesn't have to be a long conversation that's drawn out. So we're trying to design this thing to protect the hosts as much as possible from being overrun with requests for donations, or overrun with requests for people staying, and just removing that whole phone tag element completely from the picture.
I love it. I mean,
So does that answer your question?
absolutely. It just makes sense, right? It just, you simplify it and you break it down to just one form of communication, and that's it. It just, pastors don't have to worry about taking up time, like you said, trying to go through figuring out who this guy is who wants to stay here. And most pastors, in
Mhm.
churches that have prophets chamber, they want it to be used. But like you said, there are those concerns, and you brought those up. And I think those are concerns that pastors will be able to readily handle. They could a pastor, what he would probably have, maybe a secretary or an assistant pastor take care of the text messaging, I would
Mhm.
imagine, because once it's set up. So if you're a pastor, and obviously your concern is, I don't want just any missionary staying here. We love missionaries, obviously, but
Mhm.
there are certain lines we draw with who we want to
Right.
collaborate
Yeah.
with, and that's totally understandable when when you're a missionary. That's great. So what are some of, basically, when he signs up, how do you initiate? Let me ask this question then. How do pastors find out about this, especially in your early stages? And how long will it take out of a pastor's day to get his page set up to where it's pretty much intuitively running with somebody just clicking yes or no? What's the process, and how does he get all those concerns answered?
That's a great question. So we're going to try to streamline that as much as possible. It'll just be a form where they upload a main photo and then multiple other photos. That'll be the biggest thing, is just taking pictures of stuff.
Yeah.
Some people might not want to do that. I think if we frame it as this is going to save you lots of time and make use of this, that'll be, easy. There'll be just check boxes for the things that they have, whether they have Wi-Fi or not, a
Yeah.
laundry available or not. So the whole thing will just take a few minutes for them to fill out. And then they'll put the phone number that they want to be responsible for the text messaging
Okay.
um, in there. And we will promise never to share that with anybody.
Right.
And I think you could probably take 20 minutes and have the thing set up
Yeah.
as a pastor. To get people on it, we have uh, uh, Ben George is going to be calling
Okay.
the list of prophets chambers that he has as a missionary, and saying, hey, we want to save you time, we want to make it so that people can use this, would you check out this project and consider adding your prophets chamber to it? It'll save you a lot of headache, a lot of phone tag, and help missionaries out a lot if you go and do this. So my hope is that it inspires people,
Yeah.
inspires more churches to put their prophets chambers out there, but not just churches. I think there's, the term prophets chamber comes from a story of a business person in the Bible, that opened up a chamber for Elisha to stay in. And I think I'm hoping that this inspires more, wealthy people, or people that have, maybe a mother-in-law apartment that's not in use at their house, to put it on there and make it available for missionaries to stay in. I think it'll be a blessing to a lot of people. So
Yeah, that's great. Uh, let's say a missionary like me, let's say I want to, as it gets closer to you launching, when are you ready? When will you be ready, do you estimate, for pastors to begin signing up and setting up their rooms on the web app?
it's going to look completely different in a week, right?
Yeah.
But a pastor could technically go to missionhost.com right now and set up a location
Okay.
if they wanted to. You could go and create an account. It's all there. It's just going to look completely different, and it's not optimized like we want it to yet. So I would say, like I said, in a month, I think we'll be ready to launch this, especially if we meet our fundraising goals,
Excellent.
and we get enough people to give. I think we'll be ready to launch this fairly soon.
Yeah.
So
Let's say a missionary like me wants to send out an email to all of our supporting churches and supporters and just tell them about this. Is there obviously we can share the link through an email, but is there like a generic, like a specific page we could send you that could quickly explain, or would you just recommend a missionary like me just give a quick excerpt about what this is, and then, encourage pastors
I
to
think
check it
the
out?
landing page at missionhost.com is probably the best step. I probably need to go and add some things to it, because a lot has changed since I put that up a couple weeks ago. But that's probably the best thing. And then there'll be a lot of donate links on there,
Sure, sure.
and people can click, and it's just a PayPal donation.
Well,
So
excellent. Well, again, if you're a missionary listening, I'd recommend go check this out. If you think it'll be a blessing, and I think it will be to many missionaries, just copy the link, send out an email to your supporting churches and tell them about this so they can sign up, get their churches on there, and create this vast network of prophets chambers throughout the states. I think this is going to be a big help. Another question on the app. Let's say I just stayed at your prophets chamber and I want to leave a donation. Will you have something set up to where I could leave some money for the church? Because our director suggested, I know a lot of mission directors, they'll suggest to their missionaries, pastors want you to stay there for free, but sometimes you want to leave behind a little extra for the staff who cleans the room or things like that. Is that going to be an option available, or would that be something a missionary would just leave in the room? Or
I'm not ruling that out, but my gut is, I really want to avoid this becoming any kind of a money-making thing for anybody.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so my fear is that if we do that, it'll just become more of an expectation, and we'll suggest to missionaries that they leave
Sure.
a check or leave some money behind,
Sure.
as a gift or something, just for the people that clean the space and get it ready for the next people. But
Right.
I don't know that I don't want to add the donation feature at the beginning for sure.
Sure. Sure.
Just
No,
because
I
I'm
just,
afraid it will change people's perception of what this is for.
yeah, I get that. As a missionary, I hope other missionaries do leave, gifts behind for those who do take care of us. And churches are so generous to even, open up these rooms, because it can be so expensive to travel. And, we don't mind staying in people's homes, but it's a better convenience, especially if you have work you're doing in between, to have a place where it's a little secluded. You have your own room. And so it's always nice. Hotels are expensive. Airbnb is a possibility, but there's complications always with that. And so this whole app, this whole networking of churches and missionaries, it just makes sense. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I'm excited to use it when we go back in 2 years and travel around. And I'm going to sign up. I want to encourage our listeners, check it out. If you're a missionary, let your churches know about this so they can sign up and consider giving a donation so that they can get this app developed. Really, the money they're raising, when you consider, as you said earlier, what it costs to develop apps nowadays and things like that, it is so expensive. And so they're giving of their time and energy. And I sure do appreciate that. I love seeing good technology put to use for ministry, so this is something I think is going to be a big blessing to missionaries. Well, as we finish up, is there anything else about the app, anything else we didn't cover that you wanted to include?
Nope. If you want to find out more about it, it's missionhost.com. Hosts is plural, so mission is singular, host is plural. Missionhosts.com.
I typed in mission host, and it said the web domain. I could have bought it for $3,000. So yeah. Plural, missions host. Yeah.
Mission hosts.
Mission hosts.
Yes. Missionhosts.com. And please share it with whoever you can. I think I've exhausted my personal network asking for donations. So I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on. It was fun to talk about this.
No, it's been a blessing. And I'm excited to see pastors using their, developing skills and using these for, especially to bless missionaries. And we're really excited to see how this will be used. And we'll try to have you on in the future as the app develops and as it's used. We'll try to give another promotion maybe in a year from now. So this month we just finished a theme of ministry and family. And this month we're going to be looking at social media, and ministry and missions, particularly. You're going to be one of the interviews. I'm going to interview my brother-in-law, who's a pastor in Canada. And he also does web design, web development, as well as affiliate marketing. And he's created just some passive income by it's mind-blowing how easy it is nowadays to put some time and effort into developing something online, and then it can create kind of an income if you know what you're doing, and you can figure those things out. And so really excited about that. And whether you're a missionary, a pastor, or a listener, go check out missionhosts.com and consider giving toward it. Pastor Hayden, Ryan, we appreciate your time. Appreciate coming on here.
Thanks.
And sharing this ministry and this technology with us. God bless.
Thank you, man.